Here's something interesting. The fact that Meta acquired Manus, I don't think outside of the US, there are only certain jurisdictions where a big tech giant like Meta would acquire a company.
Yeah.
So this is a big validation, not because this company grew in the ecosystem of Singapore and it's because of all the foundations set in Singapore, but because it shows that a big tech giant in the US can acquire a company for several $1 billion
in Singapore. We're back. Hian, Raz, Alex.
Round three.
Hello.
Before we jump in, I have a question for everyone. I'm going to start right here. You can't have a 10-minute answer. Is China going to do anything post facto about the Manus thing? And if they do, what are they going to do?
Well, let me just check with Xi Jinping first of all.
Can you call them? Yeah.
Now, there's this obsession about the geopolitics of the whole matter, right? And my quick answer was that if they truly, as I said in previous podcasts, made a significant commitment to be Singapore first as a country, Singapore first as a company, then I think they would not be so quickly criticized for what's going on right now and think of it as just a place to safe harbor and then switch over to America. I've always said this, that Singapore is a great place to start a company. So start a company. Don't just use it to flip a company.
So you don't think they'll do anything?
Oh, they definitely do something about it.
Yeah. But what can they do? The money's already been wired.
They can make a lot of... actually, that's a good question. I don't know whether they're going to do it. Yeah. Actually, I don't know.
All right.
I mean...
Wow, Hian doesn't know.
How do you know the money is being wired?
Yeah.
They talk about it. The money's wired. Okay. But there's a thing that they can do to find people over this. So
I'll tell you what's interesting. If you were Benchmark and you received the money, would you distribute it?
I don't know. That's another good question.
So I'll give you a bit of an inside baseball thing when you're a venture capitalist. Normally, you distribute it. But what happens if suddenly there's a big legal case and you have to claw the money back?
Yeah.
And then you have to go to your LPs and say, can I get your money back? So a lot of times in these situations, I think what you do is you call this a contingent liability and you don't distribute the money and you hold it in escrow until you're absolutely sure you're clear. So I think there's a lot of LPs that got very excited when they read the news and then they go like, where's the money coming? And they go like, funny you should mention that. I got the money. And they don't know whether they should deliver it. Yeah.
But there's something to be said about the narrative around the deal.
Yeah.
And I think you said this earlier about the idea of flipping a company to Singapore versus being Singapore
washing.
Yeah. Called it. And the mistake I think was made here was that there was never a narrative of being, I want to be in Singapore because Singapore is the best place for my company and I'm going to hire talent here and I'm going to build things here. It was always like a safe haven narrative.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that angered the Chinese. And I think that's a lesson for companies to come in is how embedded do you get inside Singapore?
Yeah.
I think it's a different conversation if that happens.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference between maybe what they do in the future to prevent this versus what they do to deal with it, right? If the thing I was reading is there's like the CFIUS kind of law in China, but reverse, where technology transfer outside of China has to have approval.
Yeah.
Those approvals were not sought or received. So there is
or rather the approvals were
regulation that can
perfectly
deal with this.
fine, but now that this has happened, suddenly they have to be re-reviewed again, right? This is the whole thing. And I'm not just saying that China does this, America does this. Every government will do whatever it takes to make a point. I think the bigger thing about it is that Manus is just a pawn in the much larger geopolitical plate tectonics that are happening in this world.
Yeah. So do you think they'll do anything?
I don't think they'll do anything. I think there'll be a lot of noise. But practically, when they say do anything, will the money be held up? Very difficult. Will the founders or will anyone go to jail? Well, if they're not in China, very difficult. The question is, what happens to future companies? Yeah. That I think is a bigger question, because if this deal prevents future companies from, let's say, relocating to Singapore, that's not a good thing for the ecosystem here. I think the question is, when you're relocating, what are you moving? Are you moving talent? Are you moving IP? I think today, even if there are restrictions, there are always ways around.
Yeah.
And so I think that founders that say coming from China may now be more cognizant to the fact they need to think ahead for these situations. Maybe start your company in the first place in Singapore.
But I think the biggest example is ByteDance, right? Mm-hmm. Because Manus wasn't the first one. The headquarters of ByteDance, like TikTok, is in Singapore. So it's a good example how they separate the IP, how they did the deal. Of course, it's make more complex. But I'm not sure it's a mistake. It's about the cost, the talent. Like Singapore is not big as China in the end of the day, right?
It's not. I think we'll see what happens for the next wave. I mean, as we know, and we can talk about it here, there are more companies coming into Singapore from China today, raising money today. So I think to prevent that from happening is difficult in practice.
So do you think they'll do anything?
I'm not sure. I'm not that in depth with the Chinese culture, because if it was Israelis, I would say, hey, they're gonna fight until they're gonna get it. Okay. But I'm not into the depth of the culture, understanding how Xi Jinping is thinking, what is he wants to do in the future, how he thinks in America. And at the end of the day, Singapore is just in between these type of things.
Yeah.
Sorry to say.
So look, if you're a Chinese national, you come to Singapore, you build a company, 6 years later you sell it to Facebook, I think that's very...
No one would say anything.
No one's going to say anything. But if you do it instead of 6 years, you do it in 6 months, even if it wasn't planned, right? Maybe if Benchmark said, we never expected this, it was Alexander Wang, he just wanted to do it, right? Even it just looks bad, right? And I wouldn't even be surprised if the Chinese government go like, I get it, but it kind of just looks bad that you're here for 6 months. And if we don't investigate this, what do you think all our young Chinese people will start to think about, right? So I'll give you another tidbit, right? So we've identified at OpenSpace that this is a trend. We think it's something that's
Chinese
legitimate.
companies setting up shop here.
No, of people coming to Singapore to set up shop, of which in the AI field, a lot of them are going to be people who are historically from mainland China. And we've always said to them, and I just met a team here, and I said, like, are you guys going to be ASEAN first, right? Not Singapore first, ASEAN first. What do I mean by that? Set up here, maybe your data centers in Malaysia, maybe your customer services in the Philippines, like ASEAN first. And then you can use Singapore as the base, right? Because if you're not, I'm not going to invest in you because I just don't think, I think this is going to be disingenuous. So tell me if you really want to do it. And a lot of founders go like, absolutely, this is exactly, not only does this region have the cost structure, but also, the business practices that allow me to operate in a sort of nice rule of law perspective. So all these things are legitimate. Here's the crazy thing. After the Manus AI thing happened, I get like 3 unnamed people who are very short-termists. They go like, hey, Hian, like, let's do a Manus AI fund. And like, I can go back to China. I find it. Let's just flip it. We'll make like lots of money. This was before the Chinese government said, we're going to investigate it.
Yeah.
So I always have these like, people always come to go very short-termist and they go like, oh, we could totally do this. Oh, there's money there. Harks back to the time when it was like Bitcoin or all these kind of things. And I just find it very funny that how suddenly just one piece of narrative so it makes everyone just thinking that, oh, this is a legitimate investment thesis.
Well, so the thing I heard that just a tidbit, like there's a friend I know in the PE industry also involved in China who's in WeChat with a bunch of the characters involved in this. And she said what kicked off China being upset was more that only a certain group got to Singapore and did all this, and that the people complaining about this are some of the early researchers and scientists involved in Manus that didn't come over from China to Singapore, and that they're the ones kind of complaining. But
that doesn't feel like the correct narrative, right? What would the Chinese government say? Oh,
well,
those guys are still there.
Because it started the conversation around, hey, this IP was developed in China by Chinese and it's now shipped to America.
That makes sense.
Which I think is what China has a problem with, right?
Like, but I think we need to look at who are the customers. Very important. We'll talk probably more about this in the podcast, but. If your customers are enterprise customers in Europe and the US, there is a strong business case to be located in Singapore or somewhere else. If you are serving the Chinese market from Singapore, going back to what you said, Hian, your data centers are in China and you have no footprint outside. I actually think that there's a strong argument to say, look, this doesn't make sense. I think in the case of Manus, we don't have all the details, but from my understanding, the customer base is not China. Yeah. It is actually global. There's a strong use case to be outside of China.
And look, I don't know the Manus team, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone dangled you a $75 million check but said you have to actually get out of China. Like you might have to make that call, right?
You go and make it happen.
It's all very fascinating. Yes. And I got the WhatsApp phone number.
and I think like the one thing I find interesting about this, because one of the comments that I've read, this person showed me some of the talks, is like, hey, keep in mind they can do something. These are Chinese nationals. And I had said, Yeah, and I doubt Singapore wants to pick a fight because Singapore could make them Singaporeans
We're not going
like
to pick
that.
a fight. We
Well,
just,
I think if you started giving these guys, if you started giving these guys passports,
and you've got a couple of PhDs based upon the rules.
Maybe I'm just bitter because I can't get my passport.
Actually,
Singapore, in the end of the day, doesn't decide who wins,
Yeah.
right? They not decide who wins. They're just operating.
So,
the
so do
environment.
all you feel like this is elevated the overall chatter about Singapore? And have you?
I think that the
experienced this?
media around this was a bit disappointing, like the media in Southeast Asia.
About how they did.
I think that there was a lot of media saying this is not a Singapore company, from the ecosystem.
Yeah, I got in
here.
trouble in my comments to people saying because I said, "Why does it matter?"
Yeah, I
it is
thought-
what it is.
But you
My-
got your impressions.
No, I expected the reaction being we should celebrate this. It's a good thing.
I said this is not a Singaporean company because there was
doesn't
so
matter.
Okay, it does matter.
Okay,
I'll
it
tell you
was
why.
how.
I'll tell you why it does matter, right? Because
How?
look, I said on Keith Yap's podcast that Manus
I don't
AI
know who
coming
he is,
here.
but go ahead.
You get more
Sorry,
followers.
Keith.
You
Yeah.
get more followers than
He's
Keith,
there.
right?
He's there.
I was on another podcast and I said, look, Manus is a great beginning. I hope they stay here. And over time, there'll be a technology transfer. And so I was very patient about this idea that over time, we will have a ASEAN first, a Singapore first company, right? So I don't like it when people take victory laps saying for some reason the Singapore ecosystem generated Manus AI.
Well, I don't think,
and that was when I said, like, it's not a...
No,
I
this
think-
is a different narrative.
I think
Yeah.
generating and benefiting from it are two completely different things. Singapore itself is not generating enough things that look like this anyway. We all probably agree with that, but it's still a benefit to the ecosystem.
It's absolutely a benefit of an ecosystem, and I think you should call it out as such. But there were too many people on LinkedIn taking victory laps saying this is a Singaporean startup, right?
Yeah,
So
agreed.
I just want the record straight that this is an absolute win and a validation, by the way, just in case Shane, my business partner, is like, you got to make the point. It's an absolute validation.
Shane,
that
come on the
Singapore-
show.
That Singapore is
I've
the
asked
right
before.
place to be.
Yeah.
But to call it a Singapore startup and then kind of take a little bit too much of a victory lap, that was what I was kind of pushing back on,
Understood.
right?
But do you
It is.
think this
I was
has
gonna say-
elevated the because level 3 AI got funded?
Yes, yes,
We had the
yes.
Singapore announcement, the 1 billion thing. I don't want to go through all these things, but don't you think
Yep.
everybody's chatting about this a little bit more, even globally? That like, wow, Singapore.
So
Or-
here's something interesting. The fact that Meta acquired Manus, I don't think outside of the US, there are only certain jurisdictions where a big tech giant like Meta would acquire a company.
Yeah.
So this is a big validation, not because this company grew in the ecosystem of Singapore and it's because of all the foundations set in Singapore, but because it shows that a big tech giant in the US can acquire a company for several $1 billion
in Singapore.
in Singapore.
Regardless
So,
of how it got started,
regardless of how it got
I
started.
agree with you. It's the biggest acquisition of a big tech of a Singapore entity. And even if you de-risk it from how it got there, people should be happy that that happened.
And in terms of the trickle-down effect for other funding, for other companies, it says, well, look, let's think about our options down the line.
Yeah.
There is a scenario where you could get an exit from a US giant
Yeah,
in
so
Singapore.
let's do a thought experiment. What happens if Manus AI went to Malta and set up in Malta?
Meta's
Because by
not
the way-
buying it.
No,
Meta's
no,
not
no,
buying
because
it.
basically, right, it's like
You're in
two
Malta.
guys in Malta and 50 people in China, right? That's the same sort of concept, right? And then Facebook goes, this is great because I still need the tech. And they would have probably paid $2 billion into a Malta sort of based company. My point being is that it's actually the fact that the Chinese teams are choosing Singapore over Malta. Singapore is the catchment point between.
And you could say
those two
over
places.
Europe, over India, wherever you think they can relocate, because they could go to
Yeah.
other places.
And
They pick
again-
Singapore.
And again, I said it on
It's the food. You said it's the
your
food.
podcast
Yeah.
that you can't really do this in
Say
India
Voldemort,
because
the Voldemort podcast.
the Voldemort podcast. Can't do it in India because India has its own regulatory environments. Europe is tough. Singapore's the Switzerland of AI.
Yeah.
So it's. I thought I was going to get validated from that point. I didn't expect it to be literally 2 months after we talked about it, and I talked about it with other people as well. So it's
Yeah,
moving
and I agree with
faster
you on
than
the
I give it
media. And
credit
the
for.
media's
Yeah.
quickly dropped this and not
Yeah.
really even continued to talk about what's interesting about it. Right?
I'll tell you this though, I could probably walk around and say, give me more money as a venture capitalist, I'll find these teams. So it's probably net positive. But then if all I do is invest in people from outside of Singapore coming here and I ignore the Singapore talent, I'm going to get backlash. That's why the level 3 AI investment is actually, I think, a bigger or equivalent data point to the Manus AI one.
Yeah.
You know what's going to be a winning point for Singapore? It's something that we did in Israel. If the VP of product of Manus or the VP of engineering is going to start a new company in Singapore, and then you have the velocity of saying, okay, we have a good acquisition. They know how to do that. We want to invest in these talents.
Like you talk about the people.
Let's create another set of startups, and this is what's creating more revenues and sustainability. If it's not going to happen, that's a big loss.
I'm sorry, I have to say that's what exactly I said. Over time, this will be net positive. And people like Singapore, and for that matter, they like being in ASEAN because let's not forget, Singapore's proximity to the other countries is very synergistic.
Well, that's why I'm waiting to see does Meta keep the team here? They become a product team here? Because if suddenly they're not here, then that doesn't work. But if they're here, I agree with you. They're going to have their earnouts.
Quit.
They're going to quit. Hopefully start. If you look level 3 AI, he's a second or third time co-founder. He was in actually one of the companies I invested in before, Neuron, the scooter
Get a Singaporean girlfriend.
So I agree with you,
married,
but I think
have kids.
we have to see if that
Israeli.
We have to see if that happens. Though, right?
But let's talk about level 3 AI for a second.
You know more about it than I do.
I tell you what I'm really bullish about, and I think this is something for ASEAN-based startups to think more about, is the business model.
Yeah.
We had a whole wave of this B2B SaaS, pay a subscription
Or a seat.
Per pay-per seat, which I think is dying with AI. There's a lot of conversations around the fact that teams are leaner, therefore companies need less seats, therefore this business model needs to change. But with these customer support AI companies, they're all focused on usage-based pricing, which is, in the case of customer support, if I solve your ticket with AI, you pay me.
Yeah.
And when I think about how business leaders in ASEAN think about their costs, the objective here, and I am a startup here, is to minimize long-term ongoing commitments.
Yeah.
A 1-year contract at thousands of dollars per month is the recipe for disaster, especially if you're not so sure on your long-term financial stability. But if it's pay per use, great. I scale up. It makes sense. I pay more.
Or I don't like it, I'm done.
Yes.
Intercom.
And we are one of the early users of Intercom's AI agent. And we used to pay a per seat model. We paid a few $100s a month. Now we spend thousands of dollars per month on the AI agent. For us, it saves us money. We have less customer support staff. Actually, the quality of our responses, our customer satisfaction has improved. But for Intercom, they're making a ton more revenue from us. So it's a win-win.
But it's pay for outcome, right?
Pay per outcome.
Yeah. So this is not a new business model. Like this, it's an established business model. Okay, so
but the SaaS, but the
debt collectors in Indonesia work on a pay.
But it's not the current model for like a lot of SaaS.
No, so here goes, right? So you invent the technology, you realize that you can deliver a service 10 times cheaper. Then you try and convince a old school company that, hey, you can save money. And the old school company says, nah, it's too much pain. So you go like, wait a minute, why don't I just suck the value? And so I'll give it to you 30% cheaper, but I'll keep the most value. I did this 20 years ago. I'll give you an example, right? So in 2002, I set up a call center in Guangzhou. 2003, Skype was invented. I was making harassing customer service phone calls, outcome-based, right? If I sell a product, if I get appointments, right? In Hong Kong, the cost of an agent was 10,000
Hong Kong penny stocks?
My cost, I was selling appointments for wealth managers to meet Michael
just as bad.
It's just as bad.
to flog the Hong Kong penny stocks.
I hate to say this, right? But, each seat was 10,000. My cost structure was 3,400. I was selling it for probably around 7,000 because guess what? I walked around and I said, I could sell this to you for 5,000. I got no business. And then one day, my friend said, why don't you just go ask the other person, how much you're paying for the seat? 10,000. He said, I'll give you a 20% discount. And for Hong Kongers, it works, right? Outcome-based selling, they go like, oh, you can do this for 8,000? Okay, no problem. You do 8,000 good quality? I do for you, I do for you. Okay, I give you business. And I was like, wait a minute. I'm earning super normal profits. Because every time there's a technological disruption, the cynicism or the actual technology risk is so great, actually you can go outcome-based, right? So I've seen this before. I think this is going to happen, but there will be an equilibrium. After a while, people will go like, wait a minute, I can actually just bring it in-house. And so then the margins will compress. So that's what's going to happen to level 3 AI and all these other players.
Yeah, but the nice thing
other
about
people come in and they'll compress the
But the
margin.
people that are buying it can just move out. And I think the other thing that's happening there, I won't expressly say they're copying Sierra, but if you look at it, it's very similar, right? Which is the guy from Salesforce. I'm just going to space his name, right? And the other thing that this comes to mind to me is that I think the fast follower model of software that can work around here because you see it happening, but you have to make it work here because they got Carousel, they got local companies, they have to do different languages, Southeast Asian languages, which I don't think Sierra is focused on. That's also the playbook. And they've just been quietly doing it, and then they didn't raise money for quite some time, right? To me, that also works.
I think what happens is that in the short term, a lot of these business models grow revenue fast and the margins look fat, right? In the short term, when I was running my outsourced call center in Guangzhou, I grew fast and my margins were fat. 24 months later, PCCW sets up 1,200 people.
Killed your margin.
Killed my business, killed my margin. What do you think a lot of these players go like, hey, wait a minute, customer success is actually working. And then the other whammy is you've been playing with Claude, you've been sending me all these these things are going to get much simpler to implement, and then people are just going to go
token economics as it keeps coming down is going to rock everybody. But I also,
so what's your moat? You see,
I don't know.
That's what I told him when he showed me that stuff. What's your moat?
Well, everybody's.
Now I'll tell you what level 3 AI's moat is. It goes back to the basic principles: great customer service, great delivery. And when you use your head start, right, after a period of time, you drop your price yourself. You actually lower your price before other people come and take your business. And then you just drive down to the non-supernormal profit level. But by that time, you're a massive business. So I think actually that's a great investment. Possibly, they'll need more capital, in which case maybe I'll
call Hian.
Hian. But this is just the beginning. This is just like the first of a big wave.
I agree.
And there's a lot more you can do in that area. So we're experimenting a lot around how you can handle things like refunds.
Do you guys so the question for you guys, I've been curious, are you building more stuff yourself because of what's happening in AI tooling? Or are you talking about all the little things you're buying from people?
So we do a bit of both. For us at Raz AI, we're focused on helping people acquire customers. That's our big focus, helping solo entrepreneurs find new customers and sell products to them. There are other parts of that value chain which are very important, but they may not be a priority for us, or we have a certain number of engineers that we need to focus. So we look out and we look at whether it's emerging companies that are doing well or established companies. We talked about Intercom, it's a very established company, but we're always on the lookout for emerging companies as well. And it comes down to what business model they're offering and how neatly it integrates with what we use. But we're open to, as a company that's not, we're a medium-sized, as a small to medium-sized startup, we're doing about 10 million ARR, we still do invest a lot in these tools. And so it's not always an enterprise play for these companies. You can go to companies like us. And in Southeast Asia, I do think that in the past, if you build a SaaS company, I have a lot of our cohort of founders who started around the same time of us. Many of them went to the US. They're like, it just doesn't work here. And that's the model where I said there are a lot of companies who are entering into this. I can do things, as you said, more efficiently for low cost. And it's just getting the business model right.
So what do you guys, before we get off this subject, what do you all think of the Singapore 1 billion announcement? Is that just carrying on from what they've said before? I mean...
So Singapore, I'll explain it for your viewers. Every 5 years, we come up with a big master plan. And this is, again, the 2025
I forgot what
to
the last
2030.
one was.
The last one, I'm going to get
Other
this
than
right. It was 25
more
billion or something like that.
Yeah.
So this is called the Research and RIE program. And so it's a big budget allocation. Not the Prime Minister, Senior Minister Lee Hsien Loong is on the committee. The captain, right? After he passed it over to Lawrence, he sits on this committee. So what does that tell you? It means that somebody's really paying attention to research and development. This 1 billion comes from that budget, right? So it's ample allocation. The other allocation is to semiconductors, but it still follows within the construct that Singapore's always had. So where does this money go to? Research institutes, most likely A-Star and various other places where they'll set up centers of excellence. So they'll hire lots of PhDs to do like kind of fundamental
But there's
research.
also a chunk of it, because that's what we're working on with Oracle, which
Energy
is
efficient.
Which where it goes to a company
Yes.
where we're giving credits and the government's giving them money, quite a substantial amount,
Yeah.
if you're building things from here
That's the
for current
applied
business.
AI.
Yeah.
So I was just going
It's
to
like
just
the EIC credit or something.
Yeah, so Singapore's very, very holistic. We've got the fundamental research. What you're talking about is the applied layer. And then also there'll be grants for promising students. And then there'll be a department that helps small and medium-sized enterprises implement. So it's very holistic.
Yeah.
So I think the signal that can be taken from this is that Singapore is taking, yet again, another jargon, a whole of government approach to it, because they've identified that AI is pervasive. AI needs to be implemented throughout the entire economy. And so I think once you divide 1 billion over 5 years, that's 250 million, and it's actually not that big a number, but it's a practical use of that money. Now, I would say that on LinkedIn, you get these kind of comments saying, "Oh, it's just a drop in the ocean," when other people are dropping, billions, billions, and billions of dollars. Now, let's not put it
Your
from
Trump
that
thing's pretty
perspective.
good, I have to admit.
It's
Yeah,
pretty
It's a
scary.
very small country,
Yeah.
very small country.
But I like the food.
Yeah, I like the food. It's great, right? It's a very small country, so we can use a little bit of money. It goes very far.
As Trump, what do you think going to be the success rate of execution of this $1 billion?
I don't know. It's hard
But it's
for me
gonna
to
be
say.
beautiful.
It's hard for me to say. But I love Singapore, and we do a lot of great deals together. And I wish them all the best. But they cannot send any of those chips to China. Yeah, we don't like
Please
that.
give me money for the 250-year celebration.
Yes.
So I follow Nas daily because he's interesting to me. I don't want to get in this Grokpedia, Wikipedia trope.
I thought you wanted to go there.
I don't quite buy it
That's a good
actually,
video, man.
because
Can you explain
there's a
to
whole
the
bunch of
viewers
stuff
and
showing
me?
where Grokpedia. Well, okay, so I follow Nas daily, which is Nas, right?
Yeah.
And you're supposed to get him on our show. That's still your job at some point to solve that for us. And he's talking about,
It's
and I don't get
Nasir.
one.
We can call Nasir.
I don't want to get stuck on this. He's basically saying that his Wikipedia has been hijacked and they lie about him. And then he shows it.
Yeah.
And then he shows how Elon is building Grokpedia, which
Yeah.
researches the internet. And it's quite interesting. And I've looked at Grokpedia. But then a lot of people in the disinformation space say a lot of Grokpedia's off as well, right?
Yeah. So I think the question with this Wikipedia versus Grokpedia is, are we focused on people manipulating these articles and sources of truth, or is it about how accurate
Yeah, I agree.
is it?
Yeah.
I think I've been experimenting with both. Can I go and edit a Wikipedia page? No.
It's a cartel.
I am
It's
not
like-
a contributor of Wikipedia. I don't have the
Yeah,
authority.
you need like a license, or you need to be a known entity.
You need to be a known editor,
Or
and
you can hack.
it doesn't matter what sources of information.
Or
I
you
have.
can hire somebody
You can.
who is in that community and pay that person off.
But that shows you how crooked it all is.
It's all
right?
crooked, and
Yeah.
certain articles are locked.
Yeah.
If it's a controversial
is
topic.
is that right?
Yeah,
This
like,
is what
you can't
happened with
fix it.
So it's
Nas
fake
Daily.
news.
Yeah.
It's a
all fake
locked
news.
article, which means that even if it has stuff which is not up to date or accurate,
Oh,
it
you
is
can't.
locked.
Oh, wow.
Now, with Grokpedia, anyone can submit an edit, provided with sources. You can provide as many sources as you want.
And they go and research
And
it.
Grokpedia reviews the sources, researches the article, and decides whether it should enter the article
So what
or
happens if
not.
you say something bad about Elon Musk? You see
That
what
I
I'm
haven't
saying?
tested. But what I would say is that, first of all, the speed in which the change occurs, it
Yes.
happens in minutes.
Yes.
I was looking at one of our articles, and there was a contentious piece of information, and I just went and found reputable sources online.
So you highlight that it's off.
I highlighted it, said, this is why it's off.
Yeah.
This is the source that explains why it's off, and I provided 3 or 4 different
Yeah.
sources, and the answer was objective. They accepted some of what I said. They didn't accept others. This source is not reliable.
So you're more satisfied with the Grokpedia process than the Wikipedia
Yeah.
process?
Correct. Even if there are elements of Grokpedia that are not accurate
Yeah.
yet, the process, I think, is the future.
Yeah, even the original co-founder of Wikipedia has been saying this for years, that it's a
Which one?
cartel.
So it's,
Like I forget his name. Not Jimmy.
Not
Jimmy
Jimmy,
Wales is the one
Jimmy,
running it,
yeah.
but there's original people that disconnected from him. And I think the Jimmy thing's all about making money. But anyway, that's not the subject, because I want to bring this back to Singapore, because that's what this show is about. During his video, I'm not going to say how much, but I had to stop and rewind it because he says, and they got their facts all wrong because I've raised X tens of millions of dollars for Nas IO, and I'm like, funding secured. But you can't talk about this. What can you talk about this? Because I do think what's interesting, because we all know that you've been trying to raise money. Let's be clear about that. And I think you're the chief fundraiser besides him, right? You're hugely involved in this. Let me finish. You are sitting here in Singapore raising for what I consider to be a global media B2B startup. And it's hard, right? And obviously you must have made it. But what can you share about what's happened in this journey? Because I think it's pretty exciting, because I'll leave with, a lot of people still don't know Nas IO is a Singapore company.
Yeah.
Right? You guys know that. People talk, but I think a lot of people, when I show it to them, I go, do you guys know it's here? Now we can get into, they only hire Chinese engineers. That's another subject. But you guys are here. You try to raise money globally.
Keep up with the Chinese engineers.
Yeah, let me actually...
And just tell Nasir that he's welcome to come on the show to announce the fundraising.
Sire.
We'll bring it first.
Yeah.
I think what I can tell the viewers a little bit is the journey that we went on to fundraise, because I think it's quite interesting. A lot of people talk about this. So as context, we're headquartered in Singapore. We're Nas IO. We have customers all around the world, but our entity, our company is here, our engineers are here, our product managers are here.
And you didn't Singapore wash the company.
We didn't Singapore, we were established
created here. Yes.
And interestingly, as a company, we fundraised in 2021, 2022, and 2025. So I have reference points to those 3 periods. The first period was February 2021. This was one of the best times as a founder or founding team to raise money.
Yeah.
There was a lot of excitement. This was in COVID.
Oh, in COVID.
Wow.
Because 2020 was COVID.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
2021, it was, circuit breaker was 2020 in Singapore. And there was a lot of, we were all working remotely, but there was a lot of excitement. There was a lot of, you saw in e-commerce. I mean, remember, like C Group's share price.
Online.
8x'd.
Yeah.
There was a lot of excitement around, startups, enterprise software, just a range of excitement. So to give you context, we started fundraising on a Monday. We had basically signed our term sheet 9 days later.
Wow.
And we had closed the money
And over here, he's going, you guys telling me I got to make a decision in 5 days? Like, give me a chance to do my due diligence.
What
I
due
remember you
diligence? It
complaining
was a
about
piece
it.
of paper.
Yeah.
Yes, no, we can't disclose this. Are you coming in, or else Tiger Global's taking the
And then
ground?
he's over there going, have you wired the
That
funds
was-
yet?
yeah.
So I remember with
That was a
Tiger Global,
very tough time for venture capitalists.
This is how in those days with Tiger, we actually had a pitch with Tiger Global.
Yeah.
You get on the call, you have 30 minutes.
Amazing.
One of the partners is sitting there and he's typing something, I think, into a spreadsheet. And at the end of the call, if they're going to invest or not.
Magic 8 Ball says,
Yes or no. It's very surreal. Now, at that period, we were very lucky. We had great investors, but this is not the norm. Fast forward 2022. We actually started raising around mid-2022. Just to, as context, start of the year, Russia-Ukraine war started. The market was getting a bit more jittery. And we expected 2021, but it was a lot harder. People were not as fast to respond. We were like, 10 days. Oh no, 10 days is gone. We have not got a term sheet. Yeah. And this, I think the process took us maybe 2 months, but it was a lot of no's. It was a lot of no response. And it was very humbling, actually. And in that situation, as a startup, the key was persistence. Keep going, keep talking, because you need to find someone. It's a combination of really for us, it has a thesis on what you're doing. It's the right timing for the fund. They're actively looking for investments. And there was a good relationship with the founding team. These were some of the factors for us. Now, it's different for every startup. Fast forward 2025. When we started the process, October 2025, we were on X and we were online and we were reading, this startup raises $50 million seed. This startup raises, at 500 million valuation. We were saying, wow, this feels like 2021.
Yeah.
But I have to be honest, after, it took us 2 months this time. But we spoke to maybe 50 funds. It was not 2021.
How much of it's in person versus online?
So in the past, it was all online.
Yeah.
We learned our lesson and we said this time, actually, personal relationships
We're going
matter.
face to face.
We're going to go face to face because a lot of this is around trust. You have to build trust. There is data, of course, of what you've done. But really, and Hian can talk more about this from the investor's perspective, but they're taking a bet on the team that they're going to figure this out in the future, especially at where we're at. We are a Series A company. We are not a growth stage company. We're not a seed company with an idea on a pitch deck. We're not profitable yet. So we have some data, but it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that data from the past is what's going to happen in the future. So in person was important. We did not, from the beginning, focus just on investors in Singapore. What we learned was in 2021, it was hard to get a US investor to invest in Singapore. Today, we found it's a lot easier. So my advice for those who are listening is that there was more comfort from a US fund to say, you know what, it doesn't matter where you're
Because they'll have to wire money in Singapore dollars.
Yeah,
right?
and sometimes the fund has restrictions on which countries they can invest in. But we found that if it was a big enough VC with an established track record, they were like, it doesn't matter anymore.
I'm finding that Singapore is sort of like on the exclusion list. We were like,
I mean, it's okay.
yeah, I'd be like, we invested. And actually, if you're in Singapore, you will have a look at it as well.
But is that a new thing?
Yeah, very new, very new. 12 months, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's what everybody always wanted.
Yeah, but it's happening,
But why it changed 12 months ago? What's the
I think
reason?
Singapore is now seen very much as part of the club of developed countries, where rule of law and certainty of many of those kind of corporate
This is so funny because I'm in a chat with VCs and there's somebody trying to do an event and they said, hey, we'd like to have people come on from Southeast Asia to represent emerging markets. And I fired back, actually, Singapore's non-emergent. You can take the rest of them and club them as emerging markets, but Singapore's not an emerging market.
So I'm seeing that as well. Yeah. And also because by definition, China now is an ecosystem on its own. I don't see necessarily people saying we can do it for Indian companies unless you have an Indian mandate. So Singapore just had this sort of like we have the world's apparently
India's
the world's
got its
greatest
own,
passport,
its own funds, its own capital, its own market,
correct, right?
Like,
so if you think of it from capital formation perspective, as a venture capitalist, when you tell your LPs what you're going to do, if you're a Silicon Valley fund, you always have like a 10%. Every fund has like a 10% exclusion, and you can also do something slightly crazy. We'll forgive you. And I feel like a lot of the Silicon Valley American funds tend to put somewhat westernized or more like a more diverse team of people that happen to be in Singapore. They go like, I'm prepared to put that in our 10% exclusion. So that's really quite cool, perspective. Yeah.
But a couple of things I learned from this. The first thing was that at the beginning of the fundraisers time, we got a lot of rejections and we were like, we're not going to succeed. We spoke to a founder in the US who had raised, I think, $50 million. And he said, it took me 80 pitches to get one yes.
Of course.
And when we looked from the outside, we were saying, wow, this guy's super successful. He raised $50 million. We didn't know about the 79 rejections.
You didn't know this?
And it put me back into perspective.
I did 32 pitches before I got my seed for Asian Food Channel. But you kind of just smile. You don't let people know. You don't write that down.
You don't write that down. You don't say after 31 pitches, I'm delighted to announce.
As a VC before you get an LP commitment.
It's very similar, I imagine.
Years. I've had one LP that made a commitment after 6 years of tracking us. And it was hilarious because when we finished it, and he was the Asia guy, I go like, oh, it took you guys 6 years. He goes, I know, head office. But he was rooting for us for 6 years. Yeah.
And so that was, number one is for founders listening, do not be put off by that.
Yes.
Second thing was the best conversations we had came from warm introductions from other founders. It's not about this investor or that investor. It was a founder who was successful who said, I want you to meet this team. I think they're great because it came from the validation that I think this founder is good.
How do you establish that link? They're friends of yours already?
Ecosystem. This is how you do it.
This is why for every founder, do not underestimate.
Israel's very good at doing this.
That's what we are doing. We cannot come to a VC without someone or a founder.
It's all warm intros.
It's always
but
warm
why?
intros.
Why is the human element, Alex, so important?
Why? That's a great question.
I have a thesis about it.
I have an answer.
I think that there's a lot of opaqueness in startups.
Yeah.
Even if I give you, I was thinking about the process. So just think about this from an investor's perspective. They meet you. You have a pitch deck.
Yep.
Then they say, can I see your data room? You give your data. But what is this data? It's a spreadsheet. That's it.
Yep.
Then they're saying, okay, let me meet some of the team. Let me do some legal checks. And then it's like, yes or no.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
And
it's all kind of silly, right?
Yeah, we've seen in the past that people have abused that trust.
I have a theory, okay? And this is why everyone asks, how do you raise money? I said, there's only 2 ways, and I'm going to swear.
Fuck yeah.
Okay.
Go.
So
I
said, there's only 2 ways, right?
Yeah.
It's either FOMO or fuck it. There's only 2 ways you raise money. FOMO or fuck it, okay?
Yeah.
I said it twice.
That's all right.
What do I mean by that? FOMO is, there's a trend, right? So you just look at the trend and it goes, it's AI. So you go, I'm an AI company.
Let me get my
And then
checkbook
I'm
out.
friends with like, I used to be ex-OpenAI's blah, blah, blah. And then I am now raising this hot startup for some agentic thing. And then Michael Smith's invested and also Andreessen Horowitz. And before you even finish, everyone goes like, oh my God, I'm just going to because it's pattern recognition. In that scenario, the psychology is the decision is abdicated to this idea that other smarter people are in the round. So even if I get it wrong, I get to go like, but Mark Andreessen invested it. So that's just horrible psychology, but that's the reality. What you're talking about is the screw it, let's do it.
Yeah.
So this is
Because I know somebody.
no, it's this idea. Like when you talk, like I talk to a founder, I can talk all day long and I will never be able to erase 100% of the uncertainty of doing a startup. So you have to get to a point where you just kind of go like, oh, you know what? Screw it. I just like Nas so much. Fuck it. I'll just do it. All right, fine, right. I'll just give you the money. And you have to bring people past that psychological chasm. What you're dealing with here is not quantified risk. You're dealing with uncertainty, right? So this is Frank Knight, one of the founders of the University of Chicago. There's a difference between risk and uncertainty. Singaporeans are great at quantifying risk. Oh, is it going to be the Ukraine war?
Comfortable with uncertainty.
Right?
Yeah.
Uncertainty is like Donald Trump wake up, we're going to invade Venezuela, maybe Iran. I don't know. We're going to find out. And everyone's like, we can't quantify that. And in startup, it's more about whether you survive rather than, I kind of know the risks involved. And so a lot of times you get to a point, especially if you're a practitioner, you're an actual investor, you look at the entrepreneur and you go like, this guy is just resilient, or this lady is just going to go through hell or high water. Screw it, I'm just going to do it. And that's why meeting people in person is so critical. I met Nas in person. He's infectious. Right? At a certain point, you go like, I like him. I like Alex. You know what? Even if I give you a $5 million check out of a $200 million fund, not only am I not going to die if these guys fail, but if they knock it out of the ballpark, I'm not going to make that much money because I'm going to give him maybe a $15, $20 million check later on. That's how venture capitalists deal with the uncertainty. But you can't fax a handshake and you can't Zoom call a smile.
Agree.
So you see people in person.
You just want to get in
Love
this
it.
video.
And I really appreciate. I actually
Yeah.
met Nas in person. Makes
So
a huge difference.
what's again, we can't talk about the details, but what continents as a Singaporean
No, we know
startup
that
did
Ian
you
put, like,
eventually,
5.
As in, like, what do we?
where's the money coming from?
The money is coming from primarily. The lead came from the US.
All right.
But we did
Which
get
is great.
participation.
So you have a US investor.
US investor and then participation in Southeast Asia.
Got it.
And other places, but there
Middle
was
East too?
from Israel.
Oh,
as well.
From Israel.
And
So
we had
good.
actually, historically, what we learned was that absolutely a lead is very important for everyone listening. A lead sets the price,
Yes.
as you said, provides the.
But having a US lead for a Singapore startup is
But it sounds
great,
easy.
right?
Let's find the lead.
No,
It's
let's
always
find the lead
let's
is
find
always
the
the hard
lead.
part. But
Yeah.
the other thing we
It's very
really
hard.
focused on was the angels, meaning the individuals. Because what we learned from the past was that the best introductions for partnerships, the best way to find customers came from the angels.
Yeah.
Because the funds also are busy and they have lots of
great
other things to
lesson.
worry about. So we put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah.
I would say another learning I had from this was that in the past, my assumption was, okay, you do the pitch and you just give all the information you can to the investor, and then they will figure things out and they'll decide whether to invest or not. A big learning through this process that I think founders underestimate is how busy investors are, how resource constrained they are. They're often a lean team.
Yeah.
They're running, and you'll talk to this, they're doing many deals simultaneously.
I'm guilty of this.
The harder you make it for them,
As
the
charged.
longer the process will take, the harder it is to make a decision.
Yeah.
So don't assume that they're going to figure it out themselves. Make their life easy. And I think a lot of founders get this
No,
wrong.
but I'll give another one. It's a different thing. There's a couple of schools of thought. The other school of thought is just don't give them all the information, because what you want to do is you want to have an excuse to see them a few times. You're building a relationship. Yeah. Well, drip feed it, or just give the amount of information that's appropriate. So do you have a teaser? Give them a teaser. Do a pitch. The whole point of the pitch is to buy more time with the person. Here's access to the data room, but maybe you don't put in like really, really detailed information. What did you think of the data room? Yeah, it was not bad, but okay, then you give a little bit more information. You're not necessarily drip feeding. You're trying to actually buy time in front of that person to build a relationship, right? So I think that's also a legitimate way of doing it. Of course, people can overdo it and you get very frustrated. You just have to read the room. If you've got somebody on the hook and they really want to do it, this is the worst way of destroying a relationship. But the mistake is to give all that information and then, don't build a relationship.
So when do we get the exclusive announcement? That's in March?
March
All right.
we'll announce.
Yeah.
But I think for others out there who are looking to raise, first of all, if you're a startup in Singapore, there's a lot of narrative saying, people are not investing in Singapore, funds in Singapore are not investing in early stage. I think we are like in the Series A section, which is one of the harder periods to raise. You see people doing seed and you see people doing growth. I think that founders in Singapore should be more flexible where they pitch and think about what you need. So for us, Southeast Asia is really important for hiring. We want to get more tech talent, more engineers here. But also we do see that our business is all about Shopify in the age of AI. Helping new entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So
there are new entrepreneurs in Thailand. There are new entrepreneurs in Indonesia and Malaysia. It's not a US only product. So funds here
But
are
you're
very helpful
global
for that.
product.
I want to feel like, hopefully, just like the way Israel was always seen as an exclusionary zone for US capital, that Singapore is now seen that way as well. And I think validation comes from the fact, but it also is because Alex, you've chosen to be here. You're not like born and bred in Singapore like myself or whatever. And we are a multicultural place and anyone can come here and work. So in that regard, I think being in Singapore just means that it's base the sort of corporate hygiene. Then you really have to validate that what you're building is very valuable.
But I also think global.
Global is just one,
I think a Singaporean startup that's maybe only tackling Southeast Asia, going and talk to American VC, I don't think they're going to get anywhere. Right?
Very hard because, I think investors and anyone is influenced by what they see in front of them.
Yeah.
This part of the cycle, yes, right? In 2001, Tiger Global came and invested in more Indonesian startups than you could say, whatever.
I don't think they have very good returns.
But at this part, and I would point out that at this part of the cycle, if you don't have some sort of confluence to artificial intelligence, it's table stakes, right?
Yeah.
So,
And what I think for me is interesting, and I think it'll be great when you guys announce and more to me, the evidence continues to grow that if you take the 1 billion, which is still important to Singapore, you take the Manus thing, you take your guys' success, all these things add up to me and then the NASDAQ relationship, the few IPOs that we've had that are going okay, right? Singapore is, in my mind, pulling away from the rest of Southeast Asia to have its own narrative around being a viable ecosystem that is globally recognized.
You say that, and then all the rest of our neighbors all get grumpy.
Well,
right?
they're grumpy at me anyway.
We're all
once we
going
ship the
together.
Martin episode, everybody's grumpy at us, right? So I look, I love the place and the area. Don't get me wrong, but I think Singapore is punching on all cylinders.
Yeah.
To better what's capable about the place, and people are coming here to take advantage of it, right?
And in Malaysia, you've got data, power, water. You've got English-speaking workforce. In the Philippines, you've got great,
Well, I would argue, we've said this before.
The proximity works really well. Singapore works because ASEAN is here.
Yeah. And
right?
and I think the Malaysia-Singapore corridor is going to keep growing in importance. I'm not sure about the rest of
I mean, we can only do what we do. But I think one of the data points is that Singapore is giving great importance to the Singapore-Malaysia corridor.
Yeah, I agree.
And sees its future as being very integrated into Malaysia.
Yeah.
Right? And, if not, then people will go to other parts of the world.
We're just waiting for the TENS Torn announcement and
so
then marry that to the Razor thing.
I would agree with you that Singapore is sort of like pulling away, but Singapore has to pull away because the capital formation has to be here and so on and so forth. By the way, Singapore has been behind the Malaysian stock exchange for the whole of 2025 and 2024. So we're just kind of like coming back to, parity to other great stock exchanges. But if it means that we are able to tap external capital, the capital flows in the economic value add is by definition going to have to be in ASEAN because cost structures vary in this region, capabilities vary in this region. That's why ASEAN's going to work.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
we know from like the food tech founders we've been talking to that they're setting up R&D here, but everything else has to be done in another country.
Yeah.
Like so.
In Malaysia, they're IPOing egg companies and it's very well subscribed and they make actual cash and dividends.
What?
Yeah, like really big
Real
egg-
cash?
Yeah, real cash, and some of those eggs may be sold to Singapore too, right? It's about to go on. This egg company is going to go on to Bursa Malaysia in like a
But in
week's
terms
time.
of like, we talked a lot about buy downs, we talked about Manus. I just want to mention one other company that I think has a bright future in terms of its employees building stuff, and that is Airwallex. We don't talk about Airwallex enough. Airwallex is,
Because I feel like it's mostly in Australia.
they say it's an
but-
Australian company.
Is it an
but-
Australian company?
No, it's actually now headquartered Singapore.
Oh wow!
It's
Even the
silly.
Australians need to Singapore. watch.
Yeah, it's,
I did my research actually last week about
Yeah,
it.
Yeah,
the
it's
Airwallex
amazing.
has been incredible.
I saw one of the stats is like they're
Yeah.
moving $1 billion a day.
more.
No, a day.
Yeah,
$1
oh, yeah,
billion
okay.
a day.
Yeah.
And
Highly
even the Australian
recommended.
government's like, man, this company moves a lot of our money, right? No, it
Highly
is amazing.
recommended to listen.
But none
to
of
the
them are
CEO.
here, though.
Yeah.
None of them are here.
but the engineers are here,
The engineers,
products
okay.
here, AI, the AI
Where's the
developers here.
CEO in Australia?
Australia.
Yeah, but I think he's
He's all over.
pretty global.
Yeah, I'm sure
He's
like
all
everyone.
over.
He flies around. Don't get me wrong.
But I think that, when you look at who are going to be the CTOs of the next companies, who are going to be the CEOs,
people coming out of there.
I think it's going to be people coming out of Airwallex.
Yeah.
It's going to be people coming out of ByteDance as well. It's going Manus maybe we talked about.
Yeah.
But I think Airwallex is one we don't talk enough about. And
Yeah,
I see
fair.
the talent is very strong.
Okay, I'll throw one more, but I can't name the name of the company that we may or may not have invested. Video Foundation Model Team.
Yeah, you know which one.
You
you're
know
talking
that,
about.
right?
Yeah.
So out of Singapore, trained in ASEAN data centers, supposed to be hitting X.com in like 3 weeks. I'm keen to see how they stack up to Nano Banana. I mean, Manus had a lot of its cost structure connected to the tokens of Western Silicon Valley LLMs. This one's purely built by themselves
Fascinating.
and, meaningful presence in
No,
Singapore.
and I think there's just not enough uncovering the rocks to find all
It
these
will.
stories.
It
but
will.
I still feel like there's something about what's happening right now. That
It'll
there's a
take
lot of attention.
It'll
right?
take time, right? And I think just an iteration of the number of these things happening. One day there will just be a change in perception. But it comes like, again, right, that when was the last time Singapore was in a large Western newspaper talking about AI? It was because of the Manus transaction. and
Exactly.
we'll just continue, right? So Rome wasn't built in
And
a
I actually
day.
think
Right, just
the
the genesis,
international
just the beginning.
Tel Aviv wasn't built in a day.
the international media, I think, had the right narrative.
Yeah.
When you would listen to the podcast talking about it externally, to me, they nailed it. It was the
Yeah, they did.
locals who didn't nail it, if you ask me.
No comment, but
All right, we're going to run out of time. Everybody go around the room. Something cool you're excited about. We'll start with you. Other than your fundraising.
Yeah, I mean, look, Claude Code.
Are you using Cowork?
Claude
Anybody using
Yeah,
Cowork?
Claude Bot we were talking about. We
Yeah,
can talk
yeah.
about that. But I look,
Show
I think,
sponsored by ClaudBot.
Look,
Yeah.
one thing we've noticed is that if you look at Google Trends, the Google Trends around searching for AI has actually dipped.
Yeah.
It's the lowest point since April.
I kind of call it the trial
interesting.
disillusionment,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I think
yeah.
the people using it are working on stuff more than ever.
Look, I think
right?
it's when there's a development. In April, May, June, you had some of the new models, you had image gen, video
Yeah.
was happening. There is going to be another inflection point in 2026. So I think keep an eye. But I think you talked about some of these agents. I think Claude Code is really interesting. Some of the use cases that
Yeah.
are coming out. So I'm bullish on what the next iteration will be. The video models are getting better and better. That's
Oh,
obviously what we're really
I've-
excited about.
Go, then I'll say
For
my
me,
piece.
I see the evolution of the agent, the real agentic things. So me and Michael are playing with that, but just watching, the agent open a desktop and do things, and you just see it as a video. This is like super exciting. Yesterday, I just look at the legal document and I say, I want to put my red lines, put it on documents, put it on PDF, get it ready to the lawyer. And I just sit there and watch what he's doing. And this is
on Claude Code, right?
This is reality.
He's using OpenAI.
You're using OpenAI,
OpenAI.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
this is reality. And I'm just, export it, send it, done. And it's look like I made it. This is exciting. And you see
I think
that
anytime you have that trial of disillusionment,
it's
the builders
materialized.
are actually finding real value right
Yeah.
now. And everybody's like, other than the Claude bot thing, everybody's pretty quietly building, right? But go ahead.
I just think it's fascinating, and I just saw it on LinkedIn, so I haven't even clicked on it, that Microsoft has just announced an inference chip that
They've
they
been
did,
working on it for a while, I
right?
believe.
Yeah. So you can see how everyone is saying it's all well and fine that NVIDIA's got a solution, but I just need my own and optimized. So what I always tell people is that if you want to buy a car and the car does everything, then NVIDIA's the car for you.
Yeah.
But if you know that you're going to go Baja racing and you're going to do something, you can actually build a car, and that car will be better at that specific use case, right?
Yeah.
So I think that trend isn't stopping. And the other one that I thought was very interesting was I just listened to Marvell's earnings call where they talked about the acquisition of a company called Celestial AI. So this is very esoteric, okay? So what does Celestial AI do? It's just in the field of opto interconnects and using optoelectronics and light basically to transport information because electrons are not fast enough. And you can see just one company, just look at Marvell. They want to dominate that space from scale up to scale out, and the narrative is there. You can see how so many companies are just staking their sort of flag in one specific area, and they want to be the best at it. And I saw that in the 80s and the 90s with the PC companies where everyone decided to be good at one thing. So I think the heterogeneity of the AI universe is really proliferating. There's one ring to rule them all, which is NVIDIA. I love Jensen. I think he's great, right? But it's just by
Always taking a
definition,
shot at the
it's
master.
always going to be like that.
Well,
and by the way,
when you're number one, everybody's going to come for you, right?
yeah, but by the way, I think NVIDIA loves it because it's optionality for what they want to do. Wouldn't it be great if they had a great partner in figuring out opto instead of having to try and
See
do it
what happened to
themselves?
SanDisk.
Look at the TSMC stat.
Oh, the
They just-
memory guys?
Yeah, all of it.
You know,
TSMC
like,
just announced that-
Micron is 5x.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, it was like
No,
$80, and then that's like
SanDisk-
You see,
SanDisk
Micron just
is
shut
like-
up. They're setting up a new
Yeah.
man thing. So I'll
Yeah.
end with, I feel like I consider myself a technical person more than most people, but not a great coder. And because I don't like the tedium of writing code. I feel with Claude Cowork and Claude Code and Opus, we have flipped into a new era where I don't have to write code, but as a person who understands architects and database and engineering management, I think I've been able over the last Claude Cowork only shipped like 2 weeks ago, I think. Over the last 2 weeks with barely 30, 40 minutes a day, pretending to be an engineering manager, I've not shipped, but I've built a full stack mobile app using a real database, the whole bit that I am going to ship because rather than vibe code I want to build, I could not do this a few months ago. I have tried, and I would get stuck in a GitHub thing or stuck in Copilot, something. It would just, and then I would want to throw my laptop and I would put it away.
Actually solving a real problem.
Yeah,
you know?
and I have yet to, and I forced myself to do this. I've yet to open the code. I'm making that one of the goals of mine is I will not open the code. Not one line of JavaScript. I've yet to do it because Cowork has the files on my desktop. That to me is not something I could have done 2 months ago. And that's a huge shift. And I think if you take that, plus you see this Claude bot thing, the people who understand how technical stuff is done have new superpowers to build things where I don't need a coder to realize what's in my head. And this is something we'll probably do on the show. One of the things I want to do is actually ship this thing and talk about building it and shipping it and just see if it works. Because it's more of a like, rather than vibe code, I actually want to just build, right? And see how it goes. And to me, that's a new era. And I think it's mostly because of Opus 4.5 and like Cowork.
And watching from the front line, you doing that, it's like...
It's crazy.
It's mind-blowing, man.
And it does. It takes over my browser. It tests itself. So it opens up Chrome. It tests its own interface.
Hands-free.
I'll give you a parallel, a parallel to what you just experienced, right? So in the world of video production, back in the day, it was seen as a revered sort of technical skill, right? You had a sound guy, you had a camera guy, lighting, you had to know aperture, you got to do all that kind of stuff. And only then were you then allowed to make content. Yet today, an 18-year-old or 16-year-old can just pick up the thing and you can make content. So then the technicality of making the content is erased, and what you're only judged on is the quality of the output or the idea.
Yeah.
And when that happens, a massive explosion, industries get destroyed, great uncertainty.
And that's why I don't think we're in a bubble.
And that's why I think some people are in a bubble, but some people are just going to make out as bandits.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is going to shift. Right? Think of people who are not coders, but absolutely incredible in understanding use cases. They're just going to clean up. So great uncertainty beckons in our lives.
Awesome. Well, we got to wrap, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We
Thank you,
will
Michael.
see you at roundtable number 4.